Hello and welcome to another episode of That Recording Podcast, conversations on the philosophy behind recording with a range of guests from across the recording world. I am your host, Joe Montague, and today I am speaking with Spencer Tweedy, who is a drummer and Chicago-based musician and songwriter. He is probably best known for his work with Tweedy, the collaboration with his dad, Jeff Tweedy. Their debut album, Sucre, was released in 2014, so we discussed the 10-year anniversary of that. But he also plays drums in Waxahatchee, who are an incredible kind of Americana indie folk. I don't know how you describe that music. I love it. I just don't know how to define it. I was a huge fan of Waxahatchee, actually, and then I was looking into the album notes and realised that it was Spencer on drums. I was very happy about that because I love his playing. He also worked on the Mavis Staples album that his dad produced, his dad Jeff Tweedy from Wilco. And he writes his own material too. He's on Bandcamp, and I would definitely go and check that out. It's really awesome. And he's also written a book called Mirror Sound, which is about the sort of DIY approach to recording. And there's loads of guests in that book. It's like a coffee table style book, but with some really insightful kind of philosophy and amazing writing. I mean, Spencer's an awesome writer, and it's a book that I've got next to me here at the studio that I open when I'm bouncing stems or whatever, and I can just sort of dive in and read someone's story and look at some inspiring pictures of all these quirky little spaces that people make music out of. Absolutely love it, and it makes me feel good about the space that I work in because mine's a quirky little spot too. So yeah, this was a really lovely conversation. It's one that I've been wanting to have for a long time. I'm so pleased that Spencer agreed to speak to me. It's just so nice as a fellow drummer to discuss, well, a kind of fellow drummer and deep thinker, to discuss kind of the ins and outs of recording and approach and production and drumming style and what it means to play drums on a song in a recording environment and all of that kind of stuff. It was just a really lovely conversation. I had such it was just insightful. I came away from it feeling like that was really positive, and I really loved that. So I think you're going to get an awful lot from this. And this is the last conversation from this season. Now I'm working in seasons, hence the slightly different intro to usual. I had some feedback that the intro is quite long, which I completely agree with, and it felt like a good idea at the time, and we trialled it out. And you know what? Life is about taking risks and doing things, and sometimes it could be better, and that's what we've done. So I'm going to go back to the old style where it just comes straight in with the intro, and then I'll just blab on, and then we'll do the make noise ad, and then the conversation will happen, and that was how it's going to go from here on in, which I think is a better idea. So yeah, anyway, it feels really good to be back with the podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this season. Obviously this is a two-parter, so there will be one next week too. I'm already on with guests for next season. I've got interviews recorded and I've got interviews in the diary, and I'm so excited for the people we've got coming up, and I'm so pleased to be back at doing this. It's been lovely to hear from so many of you. I would please encourage you to get on Instagram and give us a follow. I've set up an Instagram feed purely for the podcast called That Recording Podcast, obviously, and it is run by my lovely wife Olivia. In fact, I don't even have access to it. I just send her the stuff and she puts it on there for me, but I can view the messages and things. So yeah, please do go and follow the podcast on there. There's some amazing drawings that my friend Adam Mallett's done of all of the guests, and it's not AI, it's actually hand-drawn stuff that Adam's put together for me. I wanted to keep that analog mentality even throughout the promotion for the podcast. So please do go and give us a follow on Instagram, also sharing highlighted moments from each of the episodes. And during the off-season, I'll be sharing highlighted moments from some of my favourite episodes that we've had. I've been fortunate enough to speak with some incredible guests. If you're new to the podcast, do go and dive in and revisit some of those episodes. There's some ridiculous guests that I can't believe I've been able to speak to. So yeah, do go back and search. Okay, so on with the show. This is Spencer Tweedy. That Recording Podcast is sponsored by Make Noise Pro Audio, the trusted source for new and used audio equipment. They also do repairs, so are a veritable trifecta of audio accomplishment. I've been buying from Make Noise for years. They are a fantastic company with impeccable customer service. Go and check them out online at makenoiseproaudio.co.uk, and they're also on Instagram where new gear is posted up pretty much daily. Go and do it. Do it now. In fact, do it after the podcast. On with the show! Thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Excited to. Thank you.
So what are you up to right now? You just come off tour with Waxahatchee about a month ago, is that right?
Yeah, like the middle of September. Got home and just gotten back into playing with my friends' groups around town in Chicago.
Cool. And how have those shows been? Is this, you're not quite finished? Have you got some Australian dates left and that's it?
Yeah, in the beginning of November, I'll go out with the band Phenome, which formerly known as Ohm, who I've played with for a while and grew up with Macy and Seema, the two people of that band. Come home for a second and then head to Australia with Waxahatchee, yeah.
No rest for the wicked.
Yeah.
How's it been? Yeah, I mean, how's it been coming back and getting back into the swing of it? How do you find coming off tour?
Pretty smoothly. I think I've learned from my dad to aspire to try to have a consistency between life on and off the road so that these transitions are easier to cope with. And so I've aspired to that and so far it does feel pretty easy to kind of go between the two modes. Yeah,
I mean it is notoriously difficult, and I think that's a general good life lesson, is just to have not ride the highs too high and not ride the lows too low.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, like not just remembering that it's all one unified thing. There's no just trying to be yourself in any circumstance.
So how did you get involved with the Waxahatchee stuff? I have to say, I can't remember how I came to it, but I think I must have been recommended it, or it was on a Spotify playlist or something happened, and I listened to it and I was just thought, this is, when you connect with something straight away and you kind of know, like, this is music that I'm going to love. And then obviously I'm still one of these people that looks at credits and your name was on it. I was like, of course that's why the drumming sounds so great.
Oh, thanks, man. It all happened through Katie Crutchfield's producer, Brad Cook. Katie is the person behind Waxahatchee, and she works with this producer, Brad Cook, who had heard the Mavis Staples and Pop Staples records that my dad and I have worked on. And so Brad invited me in 2021 to be part of the record that Katie and Brad were making with Jess Williamson and the band called Plains. It was a duo between Jess and Katie. And we made that record in North Carolina, and then when it came time for Katie and Brad to work on Katie's new Waxahatchee record in 2023, they got in touch with me again.
That's
cool.
It
was all through Brad listening to those Staples family records.
I mean, I want to talk about those because that's another. They're incredible, those records.
Thanks.
We'll come back to that. I've got it on my list of notes because I've got a habit of jumping around. Anybody that listens to this regularly knows that my mind just jumps all over the place, and I'm determined to keep an order. I mean, obviously this is sort of generally geared towards recording. I think we'll veer off. I'm sure we'll veer off. But what are your sort of earliest memories of recording and sort of the idea that music can be put down somewhere?
When I was about 6, my dad bought a direct-to-CD recording device from Guitar Center or something. And I think it was just 2 channels, and I don't even know if it had built-in microphones or what the deal was, but he brought that home, and then we used that to make improvised kind of like funk rock recordings in my childhood bedroom, the bedroom I shared with my brother, when I was around 6. So that was my first experience with it, and it felt so cool, and that like I said, that device burned it straight to CD, so it felt like a real record. And that was really fun. And then probably a few years after that, GarageBand was released and made prominent on Mac computers, and I started to experiment with that at home, like millions of other kids. And I remember recording like a layered solo drum piece in the basement where the drums were, just using GarageBand and kind of figuring out overdubbing for the first time, probably around like age 9 or something. And then after that, it was just like my dad had brought a couple of pieces of recording equipment home so that he could make kind of better quality solo acoustic demos by himself. And when I was a teenager looking at those things, I was like, it finally occurred to me that that if you have access to like an outboard preamp or something like that, you don't have to, that you can use it. Like, it's not terribly difficult to figure out how to do that, and doesn't need to be in a studio, and that stuff is actually just available to you. So I started buying stuff online and putting a studio together and blah blah blah. But that's kind of the childhood encounters with recording.
So is that you and your brother making stuff together?
No, mainly me and my dad.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that whole thing started really early on. I kind of, because obviously you've worked together a lot, you guys, but then I didn't imagine, don't know, I mean, I've got children, and it's kind of a balance between letting them explore gently what's going on and letting them also, I'm really conscious that I don't want to put what I do onto them, and I'm not suggesting that that's what happened to you, but there's a really fine balance between kind of come and do this with me, and also do you want to do this, like them asking me to, and how was that dynamic for you guys?
Well, I was already drumming sort of separately. I mean, obviously it's not really separate because it was influenced by the environment, and also influenced by the rock club that my mom owned at the time, or co-owned, and where there was a drum set that people would kind of like plop me down on when they were irresponsibly watching me. So it was certainly influenced by that, but yeah, drumming was almost like a separate thing that felt like my thing, and when my dad brought that direct-to-CD recorder home, I think in from his perspective, he was like, I just want to capture capture Spencer's playing, capture what we do when we jam, because we were improvising, playing around together somewhat regularly. So I totally hear what you're saying, and I think my dad has had that concern too, but I basically started playing drums when he was on the road, and is the way I remember it, at least. And whether I liked it or not, I was pining to be in a rock band because of him. So he didn't consciously, enroll. My parents didn't consciously enroll me in any lessons or anything like that. But I just ended up wanting to be like him on accident. Maybe that will happen with your kids too.
But I mean, I have to say, to be honest, it's looking likely that it is. They're already. I mean, Taylor Swift is the big influence in my house. My eldest is she's 8 and she's got a pink guitar, and she's got notebooks filled with lyrics and stuff that she writes down, and we're gently talking about songcraft with her, and
nice.
Yeah, so I think it's likely.
Nice.
So were you sort of just given free access to I suppose, was it in the basement of where you lived, the recording stuff? Were you just kind of like, yeah, go for it, have a great time exploring that stuff?
Definitely. Well, by the time I discovered those, it was like it's embarrassing to admit how bougie these little the things that were laying around were. It was like a 2-channel universal audio setup of a 610 pre, a dual 610 pre, and a dual 1176. Yeah, so really, really high quality, high end tools there. And by the time I realized that they were around, my dad had already kind of decided, like, firing up Pro Tools just to work on song ideas was maybe not the process that worked best for him. Just like opening up a handheld recorder and getting things down more quickly than that. So yeah, he generously let me do whatever I wanted with those things. And like I said, I immediately started incorporating it into a thing with all sorts of cheapo things bought online or at sales around town. And yeah, it was freely available.
How did that? How did the idea that you kind of working on, I suppose, like high end gear? I mean, that's obviously it's a slightly abnormal route towards it. A lot of people will start on, say, like a cheapy interface and work their way up. And I almost suggest that the way that you've done it is better in the sense that you kind of understood what quality was from the off. So how did that marry up with your understanding of kind of audio quality, not necessarily in terms of what you're doing with it, but just in, was there a conscious kind of like, oh wow, that's not as good when you worked with something cheaper? Or what's your perspective on how gear influences the sound of things given the order that you did things?
Well, I guess I skipped a step because there was a period where my first audio interface was one of those tiny little M Audio boxes that was probably like the second generation after the very first consumer one.
So is this the grey one with the blue trim around it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had one of those, and I used that with just 158 using the internal preamp. And then actually, when I was really actually having my mind blown by the possibilities, like really growing the most excited for the first time, there was actually an iPhone app called 4Track for a while that was so great, but one of the cool things it let you do was you could use your iPhone's internal microphone as an external microphone for something else. I guess it had to have been over USB or whatever, over the Lightning connector, but it would allow you to basically treat your phone like an SM57 or something like that. So actually, when I was like really getting into that, I was using that microphone, which has all sorts of complicated built-in characteristics. I think it has like onboard compression that was still active even when you're using it in this way. So, and a pretty harsh frequency curve. And that was quote unquote low fidelity. That was low fidelity, a low fidelity way of making stuff. But it was so exciting, and in some ways it was easier and allowed for rapid creation because it was I don't know, like using one microphone for everything is kind of like an automatic glue and you become so used to the constraints and the way your sound sources all kind of fit together when you're fit together that way through one microphone. Anyway, that's a non-answer for the question. I don't really know. The truth is, then when I did start, when I picked up those Universal Audio boxes from my dad and I started using them, the truth is I had no idea how gain staging worked, and I was also engineering as a drummer, like so many of us, like you, running back and forth from the equipment to the drum set. And so I never saw a meter. I never saw a gain reduction meter. I never saw anything. I was going and twisting one knob and then running back to the kit. And I remember, I look back on it now, the first song I made with that equipment, the noise floor is like louder than any of the guitars or the drums or any of the sound sources. And at the time I thought that was cool, but it's funny looking back because it was like I had just like the tiniest little bit of the sound source touching the interface because of that. So even when I was accessing the high fidelity stuff, I was still kind of using it in an inappropriate, low fidelity way.
I love that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
But it is interesting. I know what you're saying about it is unusual to be able to use that stuff so soon.
Yeah, I only I guess because you said you were embarrassed about how bougie it is. I mean, I suppose it is kind of cool, but it's also just the environment that you grew up in. You weren't aware of that. It's just kind of circumstances were just what they were, and you sort of you take what you get, the experience that you get, especially when you have no idea that zero awareness of what it is. You're just kind of discovering things, and it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the cool thing was realizing that you can connect, outboard so-called professional pieces, regardless of what level or how expensive those pieces are or whatever. Just realizing that you can get your hands on these 1/4-inch cables or XLR cables and kind of put different ingredients together that could be as cheap as from the garage sale on your block, like an old Shure preamplifier from a school intercom system or something. Like just realizing that it doesn't have to be the turnkey out of the box thing, and you can finagle a setup is a fun realization, regardless of the specific gear you're getting your hands on.
I think the sort of irony now is that a lot of that is sort of being used more prominently. I know that sort of interesting stuff's always been used, but I'm working on something at the moment where we're going for the drum sound that's being referenced to me is specifically like an iPhone recording. And I think that's what I'm going to use for the thing, as well as other things as options. But I imagine the bulk of the sound is going to be built up around something I record on an iPhone. And, I have to admit, a lot of the reference to tracks I'm being sent I haven't heard, and I couldn't tell you what they are off the top of my head. But it's kind of that kind of demo thing that people are doing, where someone will build up a demo on their phone and they can't necessarily let go of that, and so they're embracing it. And you can see it in the way that music's presented well, with things like, really kind of mundane things like the lack of capital letters or whatever. It's almost like people are labeling things as voice notes and then releasing them. And that's kind of quite a trendy thing. And I like that. It's that big mishmash of, on the one hand, everybody wants things to be mastered well and put through a 1073. But on the other hand, they're happy for me they think it's cool if you're using, I've got like a Fisher-Price microphone behind me that people love, and that's kind of, that cost me 20 quid off eBay,
Yeah, it is cool. I think, obviously whatever works, and people kind of celebrating casualness. I'm sure it irks some who are, hopelessly devoted to the, all the money they've invested in their setups and whatnot. But I think it's good if it lowers barriers or the celebration of the casual quality you're talking about. If it's making people feel like they can get started or keep going with anything, that's probably a positive thing.
I think it translates to production style too. I mean, I was going to talk about Suki Ray. That's been obviously 10 years since you and your dad made that together. There's some of the things on there. There's one particular track, again, I can't remember. I'm useless at song titles. That is one of my Achilles heels. There's one bit where at the beginning of the track you play a bit of drums, and then there's a rest, and then I think some guitar happens, and then it sort of backs and forths a second, and you can hear almost you putting the sticks down on the floor tom in between. And
Nobody Dies Anymore.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the fact that it stayed in, and the whole album's littered with things like that. And I'd suggest that a lot of the, like the Wilco output and a lot of the things that the style of music that you work on as a drummer is stuff like that is left in. And that's a production style that I really like. It kind of makes it feel more intimate and more accessible and real. And at times it often is, if it has been recorded in that way. And I think that that's a really a reason that I personally find a deep affinity with that style of kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, like alt Americana or lo-fi Americana or something like that. I don't know what you'd call it, but there's that sort of, it feels at the same time very well produced, but also very casual. And that is liberating and inspiring and kind of, it's comforting to listen to music that has those kind of deliberate, I don't know if you call them mistakes, but just sort of things left in.
Thanks. That's how I feel about it too. Yeah, it's like it feels more like a record is keeping you company when real people are doing stuff in that you can witness in front of you. And also the truth is, I mean, that's like you said, that's simply just what's happening. We were joking the other day that too many songs on the material that we're working on right now have that sound of my dad has started playing a song before I could even physically reach the drum booth or whatever. And so you hear at the beginning the sounds of, picking up the sticks or whatever. So sometimes we might have to consciously avoid, falling into a rut with that. But I couldn't agree more. I think that music can feel like the most exciting when there's a sense that something happened, that it just happened. You know what I'm talking about.
I absolutely do. And I want, like, I don't know quite how this is going to come out, whether it's a question or just something to add to it. But I think that for me, when I was growing up in bands and sort of finding my feet in this world, working with a lot of songwriters who sort of had almost a lack of a confidence, as we all do when we're trying to build up, sort of work out how kind of making music works. And I felt that having that attitude or having that idea of what music should be was almost, I don't know, before I understood where it was placed, I kind of felt like, am I lazy with this? Because I like the fact that that's there and it doesn't sound perfect. Is that lazy? Do I not care enough? I wonder how that was for you. Obviously, the way that you've grown up and the environment that you've got around you, maybe that you were given, you understood that was acceptable before you were even consciously aware of it. You've kind of grown into it just like that, or did you have to go through that kind of idea with it too?
Well, I kind of feel like the only thing that's lazy is when you don't make the choice to work harder on something you don't like. It's like, if you like the way that sounds, then it's not lazy to leave it because you want it.
Yeah.
and so the only time that I feel like an artist is being lazy or I'm being lazy myself is if I'm like, I don't like the way that sounds. I don't like what that is. Oh, but it would be so hard to pull it back up again and try to make it better, do a whole nother thing, blah, blah, blah. That's what I feel like where there's laziness. So it's kind of like, I guess good news is it's subjective, but the task, I guess, is to be honest with yourself. It's not just like deciding that something's good enough, but you'll know if you don't like it, or if you really do.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you felt that way. It's thought provoking.
Yeah, I think it's a natural. I mean, for me, I grew up in a semi-musical environment, but it was, you kind of, when you're jostling it with band dynamics, especially as a drummer, I felt, I did write songs when I was kind of at the beginning of being in bands, but then I fell more, into my 20s. I was certainly more of just a drummer, I suppose, and didn't have the confidence of conviction to put my point across. When I think inside my head, I knew what was, what I would have done. And it's a curious jostling of dynamics between, somebody who's made a song and kind of what they think of it, and also what they want to make it in the view of other people, because they want to prove to other people that they're doing something too. And I don't know, it's just a curious comment on that kind of rough round the edgedness of some of that music. And I'm finding the more people I work with who have lasted a bit, they haven't gone off and stopped making music or whatever, and they're kind of a bit more mature, they're more open to leaving some of those things in. So I think it's an age thing. And I suppose what I'm curious about with you is, having been in an environment where the people you're surrounded by are already at that stage, whether that it doesn't sound like it was hugely an awareness thing, or that you're thinking of it in such a different way that probably never entered the conversation.
Yeah, it is it is a blessing, or something that I'm lucky to experience. If I'm understanding you correctly, I'm thinking of it kind of twofold. There's like the idea of people leaving in quote unquote imperfections, and maybe I wasn't sure, but it sounded like maybe you were also talking about being open to like divergences from the songwriter or the leader's vision, like if you as a drummer having other stuff. What were you
I suppose so. Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with that. Yeah. I think maybe I wasn't consciously, don't think I meant that, but it certainly came out that way.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I think when it comes down to it, I totally see what you mean about it coming with a certain acceptance or embrace, coming with maturity or age. But I think what it comes down to too is like style and influence, and some people are listening their whole lives, their whole childhoods, to stuff that bears no mark of human touch. I mean, that's actually putting it too extremely, because I think even the most grid and quantized music is still, that is still an artifact of beautiful creativity, roughly, generally speaking. But some people grow up, listening to stuff that's airtight, and then other people grow up with a parents who are into punk rock, or they themselves are, grown people who were in a first wave or something of punk music, or other, kind of liberated schools of musical thought. And I guess that's one of the difference makers, is like, do you think that it's beautiful to hear documents of people like, discovering ecstatic, unexplainable things, or do you think it's better to hear like forms, like an architected building? Because skyscrapers are beautiful too, or can be, and I guess it's just depends. Sometimes people are looking for one, and sometimes the other.
Yeah, I don't think they're. It's one or other. I certainly like listening to both of them myself. It's having an understanding. Yes. I think that's a really good point. I mean, I certainly, in terms of recording, a lot of the music that I was discovering through the early 2000s was pretty airtight. I mean, it felt like it when I was listening to it. In actual fact, retrospectively now, I mean, I've been listening to quite a bit recently of stuff that I did, revisiting things that I grew up listening to, and they certainly weren't. They do sound pretty human now in hindsight, but they, subconsciously they'll have had an effect on the way that I perceive music. And I think we, certainly like with the sound wars and things like the Red Hot Chili Peppers and those kind of guys, we had almost unrealistic expectations of what a snare drum should sound like, or a kick drum should sound like, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
It's funny you mention that, because I always have this like kind of prejudice against a band like Red Hot Chili Peppers or Maroon 5 or any band that has reached a stratosphere of crossover success. I have this idea that they're not a band. Oh, they don't actually play together, blah, blah, blah. But then, my eyes were opened when Nels Cline was talking about watching the Red Hot Chili Peppers in some of their earliest days play clubs in the 80s in Los Angeles, and being like one of the best funk bands he had ever seen in his life. And you come to this realization. It's like, oh, even at these crazy levels, it's like still a band, still people that are playing together and play their instruments. That's crazy. Obviously, a lot of fancy tricks enter the picture a lot of the time. They iron out some edges, whatever. But yeah, still people playing acoustic instruments. That's kind of heartening in a way.
Yeah, absolutely is. Yeah, I mean, I remember, it reminds me of, I was been into country music a long time. I remember when I found out that Chad Smith sessioned on what were the Dixie Chicks, now the Chicks, like on that Long Way Round record. And so I listened to the record and then looked at the credits, was like, that's Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. What the heck? And that was like, oh, he's a human that's beyond the Red Hot Chili Peppers and can turn his hand to other things.
And I feel this way about, like, you know, just straight up pop music and rap music, because my brother and I watched the first couple episodes of Timbaland's Masterclass on masterclass.com.
Oh, really?
I've been meaning to come back to it because I love Timbaland so much, and I think his production is just amazing. Like, such offbeat ideas and surprising ideas and great sounds, and so many songs that I love. But what you see, you know, right away in that masterclass is him temping in songs with mouth sounds into microphones, and then he has assistants helping fill that out with other sounds, and he didn't always have a full team to work with anyway. But consistently surprised too, even in you know, more electronic realms or whatever, that you know, it's like ramshackle at the top of the Billboard Top 40. It's like often still just like there isn't actually a secret laboratory, like a deep state laboratory where top 40 music is like constructed with strict laws of physics or something. It's like kind of just you and me.
I love it.
With some asterisks. Absolutely. I mean, that's the way it seems. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I've got a friend who plays... I don't know whether I should say it, but I've got a friend who plays on some major artist stuff in the UK. He plays guitar. And again, it's just him with not an inexpensive pre with an inexpensive mic in his back room. And he has a day job and he does music part-time, but his guitar is all over top 40 records. Ridiculous. It's exactly what you say.
And look at Billie Eilish and Phineas. I mean, they're famous for literally being in having made their early hit records in their bedroom, their childhood bedroom, and just even another example. I'm
excited about that. I mean, I feel as though, you know, listening to that, I mean, again, going back and calling it kind of like, I don't know, alt Americana, if you want. I literally just, I have no words for what kind of music
Neither
it is.
Neither do we.
No. But that, I feel like there's a convergence of popular culture and that style now, which is in a really good position. And I had no intention of talking about this, but with the emergence of AI, I'm kind of excited about this. I think there's going to be a swing towards even more of that, actually. And we're going to find that a lot of people are deliberately fighting against it and wanting things to be more honest. And I think social media's got a good, it is good for that too. This kind of idea of people presenting a perfect self, that's not what we want anymore. We want honesty and integrity in what we put out. And we're a much more, I mean, in a lot of ways we're not, but in a lot of ways we are a much more tolerant society of, oh, well, this is just who I am now. And, if that's what it came out as, that's what it came out as. And, as I'm saying that, I'm becoming aware of something else that's interesting we're often perceive that these kind of things, quirks that are left in things are going to be viewed as negatives, and actually the listener almost never perceives them as negatives. You know, I've never listened to any of the records that we've mentioned and gone, oh, I heard his sticks clicking. That's not very professional. You know, it was the opposite. I assumed it was a choice, and I you know, because you said it was, you know, because the music said it was a choice, I was like, well, they must have left it in on purpose. It's got to be, it's a deliberate thing. I think the listener's always present with open ears and aware that it's a choice. And I think that when creating, it's often forgotten that the listener's on your team.
Yeah, sometimes I remind myself of that in the studio when I'm concerned about someone reacting negatively to something, remembering that being on record automatically imbues it with more intention, and that, you know, you don't want to abuse people's trust. You don't want to abuse the trust that they have, that what they're hearing is what you want them to hear. But it's like has an elevating effect on anything that ends up staying there, because it was left. Yeah, me as a listener, anyone as a listener is like, oh, well, you know, accident or not, it's there. So that's on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a bit about. I mean, we've already mentioned Suki Ray, but that wasn't the first time that you'd worked on something sort of as a, I don't know how you'd say it, like a major official release or something with your dad. Was the Mavis Staples thing before that? Was it? Yeah, because you've done a couple of bits with her. Yeah, that's it. But then, so how was the experience of? I mean, the Mavis Staples stuff you guys have worked on is ridiculously cool. It's so.
Ah, thanks.
Yeah, like your playing's great on it, and the sound of the records. I mean, she's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And like what's the? I mean, just using those as kind of like a vehicle for discussing that. Like, what was the? How is that kind of working? You know, as a 6 or 7 year old making funk music with your dad, and then how was that kind of become sort of turned slightly to a more professional angle? And how was that for you? Sort of having to step into that environment. Did you feel a bit more pressure in there or not?
We kept it pretty low pressure, you know. It was kind of nebulous at the time because my dad and Mavis had set out to make that entire LP as more or less of an acoustic duo record just between the two of them. And so when we were overdubbing drums for the first time, it had a feeling of, you know, we're just trying this and we'll see, you know, we'll see if it makes sense. We'll see if, you know, if everyone's even okay with it going in this direct, everyone meaning Mavis and her managers and whatever, will be okay with it. And the other thing is, you know, was already very, very comfortable with playing with my dad, comfortable spending time at the Loft, even though I hadn't really worked there professionally myself yet. And I guess felt, you know, confident. Obviously, I mean, I feel, you know, like I vacillate between between like an unexamined confidence and intense self-doubt, just like anyone. But not particularly unique, but definitely from a very early age just felt. It's actually funny, at this time my dad said something, I think it was in an interview after Suki Ray came out. People were asking him like, how was it to play with your son, blah blah blah, and he said something along the lines of like, oh, well, you know, it was just so exciting to realize that he could actually, you know, cut it on in the studio, like play on the level with me. That's not exact. I'm not phrasing it how he did, but the idea was like that he was, you know, good enough to play. With us, and I would.
It certainly feels that. Sorry to interrupt you, but it certainly feels that way from my perspective. It feels as though, there may have been a time when it was just a nice thing to do with your son, but at the same time, it superseded that. It was like, oh, it's just clearly really great at playing drums and is a great musician. Well, then why would you not use the closest great person to you?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, right. And he explained, I kind of asked him about this interview afterward, because I wouldn't say my feelings were hurt, but it was a funny thing to read, because I didn't realize that what he explained was that from his perspective, it's like, as a parent, you never want to overestimate your kids'
of course
ability. You're participating in the real world. You're participating with strangers. You're making stuff for an audience. Blah blah blah. You don't want to embarrass yourself or embarrass your kid, kind of being off base because you love them so much, and which makes sense. And I hadn't really considered well enough. But from my perspective, I was really cocky as a little kid, playing drums by myself, teaching myself how to play drums from such a young age, and then as a teenager, throughout my entire adolescence, playing in a band with my friends, playing all the time, considering ourselves a real band, considering ourselves professionals with big aspirations and ambition. And so by the time that I was 16 or 17 and getting this opportunity to play in the songs that my dad and Mavis were making, of course it felt like a big change, really exciting, really special, definitely absolutely not something I would take for granted, but personally inside myself felt like, oh yeah, of course, like this, I am a professional drummer.
Yeah.
My dad wasn't there yet. Didn't think of it that way. So it was a shift for him, and in many other ways, shift for me. But I don't know. I just felt like, oh yeah, I already, I like recording. I would do this by myself. Whatever, Yeah.
Yeah, it felt natural. Had you been at the Loft and observed sessions before then?
Only a little bit. My band with my friends had actually made our first LP at the Loft 1 year before the Mavis record was really getting made. So that was the first time I spent a bunch of time there. But earlier than that, I guess I had only just popped in and witnessed, hours here and there. And
yeah.
I mean, when I was really, really young, like around the time they first got the Loft, it was my favorite place to go. Like, getting to go with my dad while he went there to pick up a guitar or something and bring it home was so cool to me. It looked completely different. It was very sparse and hardly furnished and reeked of cigarettes for like, I feel like it just started smelling like cigarettes. But yeah, I had only caught glimpses here and there until around 2012 or something.
Thank you so much for listening to That Recording Podcast today. I'll be back next week with more conversation all about analog recording. And for now, don't forget to hit subscribe, and please do share the podcast with friends or anyone else you think is as nerdy about recording as we are. If you'd like to follow me on socials, you can find the podcast on Insta at That Recording Podcast. For my adventures in Ringo nerdery and all things Beatles drums, it's at All You Need Is Drums. And if you're just curious about my work and recording and maybe the odd picture of me having a beer or hanging out with my wife and kids, it's at Joe Montague Drums. And in other exciting news, I have a TikTok. I don't really know what TikTok does or is, but my wife says I need to have it and it's cool, and I should tell you about it. So there we are, follow me on TikTok. Don't be a stranger, and see you next week. Goodbye!